Hello, this is Blue Astrum Solstice, and today I'm going to challenge you with a little bit more of how well do you understand the War of the Shattering and Elden Ring? Well, let me put it this way. Who do you think is doing the invasion of this encounter here as recorded? Before I get into the real answer, do you think it's A. Radahn, B. the Carians, C. Malenia, or D. Godrick? But if you said D. Godrick, you would be correct. And this is in fact Godrick's attire for his soldiers, specifically for the surcoat. You can tell because the colors change from left to right, whereas if it was Radahn's, it would change from up to down. If it was from the Haligtree, it would be just a single color. If it was the Carians, it would be 1, 2, and then back to 1. Whereas this is just 2 colors, and it portrays a lion-like figure on one side for certain, and something that could be suggested as the crucible tree on the other. And plus we see over here these foot soldiers with this hat piece here. This like that with this metal rim going outwards like that. Almost like a farmer's hat. That is more of a trait of Godrick's men. And I'm about to go a little more into detail with that. Another thing you're probably asking is, isn't this of Radahn, and isn't it in Leyndell since Morgott is here? The answer is, that is Radahn. That is Morgott, but probably more likely this could be a version of Morgott, as we do see him in literally 3 places in the game. We see the real one in the throne region of Leyndell capital. We see a fake one outside of Leyndell, and also we see a fake one outside of just outside on the outer parts of Stormveil Castle's gates. Like just through the first gate, we see him guarding it with his life. And just as interestingly, we see a banner here in the distance that we can't quite make out. We see some of this business going on of formations or like formidable structural defense stuff. And we also see this sort of cloudy, almost weather going on here, with little else to explain. So you can see where I'm going to be going with some of this overall conversation. This could very well be Stormveil Castle. Alright, so back here in Stormveil Castle, we do see some of these stakes here up and about, propped in the same general vicinity that is Morgott's arena. And just as true, we see weapons and things also placed about. We see what could be suggested as a bit of like banner wrapped around like bits of like a broken spear or something. Not too sure. But we also see that same kind of overall gray skying, almost stormy, cloudy environment, or like feature going on that we see in the background of that shot. And overall, this is a common view here in Stormveil. You know, if I wasn't stuck on this. But we really can't quite make out the banner hanging in the shot. Now, it very well could still be somewhere else, but there's still actual history proven of Morgott sending his clone here, Margit the Fell. And something else you're probably noticing is that this spot here is littered with the weapons of Stormveil's troops also here, which could suggest that there was quite a lot of fierce battle. In fact, if we go further in, we have the quote-unquote hardened old hands. Now, some of the question that is hardly explained is, why are they hardened old hands? Well, that suggests that they were experienced. Like, if they're experienced, you would become a hardened old hand. You would have probably defended in numerous times. In which case, some of this destruction isn't solely just from that of the death roots climbing up some of this. It is genuinely destroyed from like some sort of an attack somewhere. As for by who, it's not directly stated. However, Kenneth Haight might have something else to tell us.
Ah, you've come to lend me your aid, have you? Well, that's very kind, but no, the help is very much appreciated, even from a tarnished. Despite appearances, nobility is no prerequisite to serving the true order. You might have heard of me, Kenneth Haight. Next in line is the rightful ruler of Limgrave, young Tarnished. I would have a boon of you. I want you to take back my fort. It lies to the south, beyond the Mistwood. A knight commander from Stormveil took it. A fool, and plumb mad to boot. Simply obsessed with blood. What are you waiting for? My fort lies... Oh, I see. Fret not. The great Kenneth Haight is known for his considerable largesse. The celebration... yes. Now, allow me to furnish you with a little advice. I would take great care to avoid Godrick's tarnished hunts were I in your shoes. That depraved lot are obsessed with sacrificing tarnished like you for the sake of grafting. Honestly, Godrick's nothing more than a jumped-up country bumpkin. Lord? Oh, don't make me laugh. First, he hid himself amongst the womenfolk to flee the capital, then hid from Radahn in that castle. Then he insulted Melania, lost to her in battle, only to lick her boots rather than die like a man. Has he no shame, the big girl's blouse? And to think, he's the blood of Godfrey, last of the golden lineage, though you almost wouldn't know it to look at him. Yeah, I almost feel sorry for the chap the more I think of it.
But, if you didn't quite catch that, he was essentially saying he refused a challenge from Radahn. But to kind of further into the point that it was indeed Godfrey's men that are burning here, not some entity of Radahn's in any way, shape, or form, as well as Godrick's own men who were featured into that story trailer for Elden Ring. Here's a better look at Radahn's men. One is right before me here. Let's just pop this. As you can see, he has what's more of like just a singular little visor up the front and nothing to the side. Although he does have quite a side coverage. Although he doesn't seem too fond of the fact that I'm right here. Let's fix that. But another thing is the fact of what the weapons are up above us at this point. Very distinguished looking difference in terms of weapons, suggesting it's definitely not Radahn's, but instead that is definitely the appearance of Godrick's exiled soldiers. Which definitely suggests that not only had they had some kind of beef, but Radahn himself has been further inside of Godrick's Stormveil Castle, and deep enough to actually accumulate weapons that are found only deeper in there by Godrick's quote-unquote hardened old hands. Which very well could tie to the idea of when exactly this issue of a challenge happened and took place to. Otherwise, we have very little to physically go off of to that topic. But this is a bit of like a poor example as to who is being burned. But we see quite a few common folk of that sort at Godrick's. But there was other examples elsewhere. It took me a moment to remember exactly where I seen it, but as you can see, they are hanging up. Well, they're sort of hanging out. Yeah. I kept thinking they were burning or something, but no, they're just straight up hanging out. But we also see shields and weapons of the banished knights about here, which seems to me as marks of proud defeat of strong foes, maybe even worthy foes. So at the very least, it seems like there's definitely some sort of conflict that had occurred between both Godrick and Radahn. As for how intense, that leaves to be determined, or at least in any mentioned state. However, the fact that he was challenged and there is all these like bodies and armor and things is enough to suggest that that they had visited Godrick's castle. They have taken over quite a collection of Godrick's own arsenal, and even like taken and punished some of his lowest of the lowest. And quite frankly, we do find Jaren, Redmane's second in command, around here where Sellen gets kept in a cellar. So as to why he would have it all the way over there and not somewhere else is a huge mystery, because this bridge is guarded, mind you. Castle Morn is basically fallen, but as opposed to having it somewhere over here, he has to go all this way, straight through Caelid, all the bad parts included, maybe a death bird or two. He has to either go down here, which put up against a few trolls, or maybe the undead, maybe some rune bears, a few of those wandering mercenaries, through this bridge of horrors, which had not totally killed me the first time. I don't think I actually died the first time. And then still all the way over here, through some Miranda plants and demi-humans, maybe a few wolves, then maybe a mausoleum knight, and then, well, this part is actually a little understandable. It's a bunch of Raya-Lucarian, or in general Carian entities, so it's probably actually pretty friendly to him. But it's like, why would it be all the way over here? Why here specifically? There's nothing else too magical in this part except this rise that we don't quite understand. Like, nothing else here seems too in regard to the Redmanes in any way, shape, or form. So it's like, why would it be here of all locations unless they just sort of infiltrated this far? And that's the thing, they likely did infiltrate this far. Like, if we actually go back to the Stormveil region, we will see certain other details. Like, yes, there's the damage, severe damage along the outside walls of the castle, but there is another detail that strikes me as quite peculiar. All along the outside of Stormveil Castle, nowhere in the inner, except for maybe the Divine Bridge, you can find all kinds of wreckage and ruin of golem parts, suggesting there was plenty more golems in this general vicinity, but they got destroyed or wrecked somehow. But if we look far and hard enough, we will still find quite a few active golems. Like, there's one underground to, like, the further east, and that's underneath the bridge. There's, like, one or two in this general outdoors cemetery regions. Like, I think there's, like, one over here, or maybe, like, one over there. There's definitely one to the northeast, like, up here. Somewhere around there. And then there's some on top of the bridge, of course, like I said, to the Divine Tower. So it's like Godrick had these. He had them just here for whatever reason. And not only did he have them here, he has one right here. I'm actually going to get rid of that marker. He had one down here for some reason, which is even further down below than it probably should be. I'm not too sure what that's about. But he just has this plethora of them, and it just doesn't make too much sense. Now, I actually have this theory to that it's actually related to the crafting works of trolls, because if we ever go meet E.G., something we may notice is what his crafting station is like. Now back here at Liurny of the Lakes, if we take a close look at the coals here of E.G., you see they are of really vivid bright blue. But more than that, it looks awfully familiar, almost like a certain ankle feature of golems, which further is like further convincing to the idea that there's two things of the same craft, like trolls maybe making golems and so on and so forth. In fact, we do find another sort of cemetery of golems, which is actually in Mountaintop of the Giants, close to where we find Juno Haslo. I guess that's this one, huh? Yep, Juno Haslo. And there's nothing too notable about the general region, but further on inward in the region is where we start seeing the absolute massacre zone of giants, which could suggest that this would be like the initial zone of the trolls, in which case we do still see like after that general area to after like the frozen lake and that with the dragon, we do see like quite a few like Yeti looking trolls there, which does leave quite a lot of potential to the theory. Like, trolls are a convenient placeholder, almost enemy to a lot of the game overall, but they get very little explanation to a little of this and that, and that goes down to that little tablet that goes within them. People suspect that could be related to the means to control them, because if you look at the fire giants, they have like their faces of like their fell god on their chest, in which case it could be like to replace that as like a embodiment of power or something. There's all kinds of theories that go around for that one, but overall there's very little reason to suspect that they couldn't be related to the creation of the golems. Everything related to the golems suggests something of a ruined ancient civilization, which doesn't quite match anything else too closely. However, the designs that go into them match much of this sort of nature. But besides that, we do know for a fact that EG has made weapons and things for the Redmanes, in which we also see improved like golems in the direction of the Redmanes, which is also quite interesting. Like he has factually made, according to Jaren, he has factually made them these like great swords, which Jaren himself says they're like really crude and all that. So it's like, huh. And Jaren will just also say they were pretty effective at fighting against Malenia's Scarlet Rot. So there's certain things to consider there. And quite frankly, if EG was behind it, he might even also contributed some of the other nature of golems in the Caelid region, possibly even for Jaren, where we see them have like magic properties. And there is 2 exact locations where that is like a sort of a thing in Caelid. There is the 2 that guard here, which use magic enhanced great arrows, and then there is a singular one, which is like down here overlooking Radahn's arena, and he has the halberd and does like the laser stuff. These are the only golems in all of Caelid, and they are in front of like semi-important locations, although we still don't quite understand the nature as to the laser one being right here, which could be in regards to Fort Faroth, and maybe a dragon kicked them off or something. I have no idea. But we're getting a little off tangent as to what I really wanted to go on about of this video. So let's get into what I should have been gotten into a little sooner. The general conflicts. Now when it comes to the War of the Shattering, much of it really just started with here in Leyndell, to my understanding. Or at the very least it started with an act caused by Ranni, perhaps. But it ultimately became Marika shattering the Elden Ring, Radahn trying to repair it, and basically the great runes of the Elden Ring being shattered, scattered, handed out to the children, and ultimately a few of them just sort of rose up and started warring. That is, for the most part, the main real whatever there is to talk about in terms of the background of what happened with the Shattering. We don't exactly know the full list of Marika's, you know, her ideal reasons behind actually shattering it, if there is something else to it or not. A lot of people have ambiguous ideas, more so strung together ones, especially along the lines of, oh yes, she was very upset because of the death of Godwyn, or maybe it was something along the lines of, she had this huge plan to bring back Godfrey, or I have no idea. But until we get like a further idea of it, it really is just seeming like it's more like a plan or more like a mistake. Maybe she was very upset. Maybe some things just weren't going according to her plans. I personally am the believer of that last one. Like, she was chosen as a sort of god of the Golden Order in its representation and glory, and she basically plucked death from order in its formation. Now, in the process of this, a little of everything was just proving less and less perfect for the design. Like her first son, some of her earliest sons were born omens. Most of her children were born accursed in some way, shape, or form. Just in general. So, there's that. Godwyn became living in death. Death roots scattered out, spread out. Basically, much of what was the intended image, ideally, was just ruined. So, what really is there of this ideal order and perfect reality that was no longer truly perfect and was just straight up ruined? That's where I personally see this going. But that is still speculation, and someone could probably prove it wrong somehow. Or find like some kind of obscure detail, just like, oh, America has high hopes for us. But that could still play into part of it or something, because if she has high hopes for us, she was hoping that we would somehow fix it and restore it from wherever it was truly broken and not working. That's right. She had high hopes in me because I had a squid mask on. Never forget that. But that also means she had high hopes in you because you wore an Albednoric's face. Never forget that. But let's get to the real rest of the conflicts. So Ranni just sort of was already responsible towards the cause of it en route. However, the real conflicts between the other demigods in that were an actual result of the War of the Shattering itself. Ranni sort of was not interested. She just sort of backed out and hid in her manor. And then the other demigods had some kind of war path going on. And I'm inclined to think it started with Godrick. Although I think they all received some amounts of great runes. I think Godrick started the first warring. And in turn, because he probably insulted a lot of people as a result, I imagine Radahn probably issued a challenge for Godrick. And instead, Godrick put some kind of issue of a challenge to Malenia. Little did he know, Malenia would be way too much for him. And not only that, Malenia got the challenge and won. Radahn didn't get the challenge. He would likely want to face Malenia as a result. Now, the issue with issuing a challenge like that is the way to Malenia is at the Haligtree. And most people don't just have the Haligtree medallion to go there with the lift of Rolled. And quite frankly, it's in some forbidden general territory. One that existed before Radahn's time. Suggesting that he likely hasn't actually been that general vicinity. Which is probably actually why we don't normally see too many gravity entities this general direction. Although we do see that singular Estelle that's like over here, the Bastard of the Stars. But you know, he's more of an exception than the rule. Then we see like the Tarnished making their way in this direction. And even some of the unfavorables that Miquella extends reach to. I believe the lack of clarity that goes to the Haligtree has just sort of left it alone for the most part. If you actually pay attention to it, it's not very protected. It just has like a singular seal that goes to it. That one time. Overall, much of the Haligtree is less of a fortress and more of a hodgepodge. More of just like a place where people just sort of shoved a bunch of people and somehow they made a giant weird tree fort out of it. We had the holy section down there, we have the giant ants up here, we have the bugs down below that look like shrimp. We have these envoys up here. Somewhere down there we have some collection of weird corpses as well as the misbegotten. I've seen those cocoons that have like the albinorks inside them, the Gen 1 albinorks, where their like feet are like fading away in that. Then we have I recall there's like a few sorcerers as well as Loretta. And then we see that in the weaponry for the Haligtree there is Mikola has included like relations of ties towards sorcery because, you know, Golden Order fundamentalism. In which case, he really did believe a little of everything can be conjoined. And just like Turtle Pope said, as Muriel said. And then of course we have the Clean Rots and Millennia also. And for some reason we have the Royal Revenants. It's not too sure exactly what exactly faction or people they came from truly, but their locations are peculiar in that they were probably just really shunned and disliked by most royal honest people, or not even honest, but just royal holy people. Like you see them in the shunning grounds. You see them in the Shaded Castle region. Interestingly, we don't see them in the Volcano Manor, which could suggest something. But we see them about in Liurnia along with the Wraithcallers, which we also see the Wraithcallers up here in the Shaded Castle. For some reason, we don't see the Wraithcallers here in the Haligtree, and we don't quite see the Wraithcallers here in this hideaway tunnel, but we do see a single Royal Revenant there, and my god, is that a bad spot for him. So those little details out of the way, we really don't quite understand where they fit into the equation, but they're likely frowned upon by the Golden Order and accepted at the Haligtree. There isn't much else to say about that. But like I said, it is just a hodgepodge of a lot of anyone and everyone. So overall, the Haligtree was probably treated as more of a haven than anything else. And even if anyone wanted to threaten it, they have to go through this place, Ordina. Like, I like Ordina. I just don't like the archers here. Everything else here is actually okay. But, by the way, if you never know, where is it? Pull up a torch. There's a thing that shows up here. Only if you have the torch. This singular one doesn't show unless you have the torch out. Just in case you wanted to know. Also likely, I don't exactly imagine Radahn as anything less than one of the aggressors of challenges in this ordeal. But I do imagine also he would be probably too proud to threaten damage to anything related to his father's legacy directly. In which case, obviously, he would have less qualms attacking Godrick here. But his confrontation with Malenia would just naturally happen in Caelid as a result. With everything I just said. Like, they can't get to the Haligtree. The Haligtree isn't even fortified for war. The only ones of the Haligtree who are in any way battle ready for the greatest war of all time is without a doubt just Malenia and her clean rotten knights. And as for like anything else there with the Haligtree, it's just Miquella's. And quite frankly, Radahn's Redmane Castle is very fortified. Like, just trying to approach it on the bridge, we see lots of catapults shooting at us. We see towers of, like, archers along the way. Like, we have this tower. I think there was, like, another one on this side somewhere. I could be mistaken. But we have that tower there also. We have the catapults, like I said. When you get to the gates, there's a troll waiting to jump down, and he has a fire-imbued sword. We have knights upon knights upon knights all the way through here. All the way to the front. What is now currently pretty well destroyed by its current conditions is still in ways quite fortified and fighting off its current present day Caelid. Like, we see all these smoldering walls, we see all these staked fences, or whatever you want to call them. We see huge pits of fire with burning dogs. This guy here shooting at me because he's got nothing better to do. I thought maybe I had a kukri right there, but I don't. Usually I like my kukri there because they go so far and hit so hard. But yeah. It's hard to say exactly how defensible it was in the past, especially with how very different its present is compared to them. Like, these trees were probably much more lively. These some of these skeletons here were probably a little different in how covered they were. I call them skeletons. They're basically giant skulls in that. Not much is too known exactly what that was about. If that was anything too crazy and related. I don't quite think so. I think it was just part of the scenery even back then. But it probably became more unearthed from the battle. If we actually take a look over this fight, they actually do a pretty good job at taking the fight to these abominations here. Like, they're using tactical maneuvers to, like, surround and undo these rotted beasts. It's actually quite fascinating when you get to see it. And it, like, shows us a little bit of what the modern conflicts are compared to what was probably a glimpse to the past conflicts. But that was essentially the conflict between Radahn and Malenia. In which case, he got his challenge with Malenia. He got it fine. And both pretty much did not win. Although Radahn lost a little harder, I would say. Can you actually track me from there? Okay. But let's take a look at another sort of conflict, shall we? I know for a fact this conversation is going to come up some point, but so I'm just going to address it now. I don't think Radahn and his men attacked this station. I think this was actually left alone for the most part. But certain events probably have made it seem better days. Alright, so far we've mentioned that Godrick picked a fight with Leyndell. Or at least I kind of mentioned that one briefly. But yeah, he essentially assaulted Leyndell. He got himself, was probably the event where he got his great rune from. As well as meeting probably Morgott in the process, I would imagine. And he also took with him a series of treasures. Now, one of the more prominent treasures we definitely know about existing is between a piece of Godwin's face, the Mimic Veil, which is also known as America's Mischief, which is also one of my favorite items to use. Whee! Then there is also a seal of the Godskin Apostles, as well as a prayer book for the Godskin Apostles. And those are the main treasures that we know of. Whether or not there is anything else is not quite determined. But we know in this conflict with Leyndell, another relative of his was kind of captured in process. Someone called Godrick, who looks a little much like him, only he didn't quite attach a dragon to his arm. I think he was stopped before that was a true process. But they were both of Godfrey's lineage. But because of their nature and ties more so to his lineage to the Crucible, they were also able to manipulate life in the sense that they were able to make use of the traits that all life was once blended together and essentially integrated as part of themselves and their body through the process of grafting. Right, it doesn't quite conflict with them. It's just a little... it's a thing. If that makes any sense. But Leyndell was probably one of the most fortified places that was in receiving of a whole war at place of it. Exactly how far in Leyndell it became a war zone is not totally understood. Quite frankly, it's not understood what the purpose is of this, because it's like the only example of it in this kind of a distance from outside the gate. But I imagine this is related to issues they've had in regards to the Volcano Manor, as well as loss of like their shaded castle or something. But more so I think it's in regards to the manor. Could be like a watch post or something. But we see anywhere that gets a little closer that direction, as well as the Volcano Manor, is just becoming more and more of a destruction zone and graveyard. Which takes us into our next conflict for Leyndell. It's conflict with the Volcano Manor. For those unfamiliar, essentially Rykard joined that of the Inquisitors of the Erdtree's capital, the officials as it were, and getting on the inside, he essentially usurped it from the inside. He took over. He took everything from them, and he gave himself to further blasphemy. Just one way, another, and he kind of kept going until even his own human soldiers were like, okay, this is a little much even for me. In which case, those unfortunate enough to see eventually joined part of the list of the passing and tried to work out a means to slay their lord, which ultimately became the giant spear, or not giant spear. Psh, my gosh. I was thinking of like the Storm Ruler Giant Slayer. There is the Serpent Slayer Great Spear, or Serpent Hunter, which is used for specifically great serpents, like Rykard had become. Other than that, a lot of who exactly remains still among Rykard's human soldiers have since gone mad. They've been blighted with madness, as it were. Now, overall, the usurped process actually took even the officials of the Erdtree by surprise, and these are people who do all kinds of shady things, which is also part of why their castle is shady, with that of House Mirai. You know, I always forget there's a golem in that region. Just like one of those things, you don't have to think about it. Just one of those moments where it's just like, oh yeah, I forgot that's there. But House Mirai was essentially the head household of the officials, and well, their mask really says more about them than I can. Mask in the image of a white-haired young noble, customarily worn by the head of House Mirai. The Mirai family is a dual history spanning generations, serving both as executioners and castellans of the Shaded Castle. This mask bears a likeness of the first of their line. But let's also take a gander at the rest of their attire. If I could draw fewer blanks in my brain. Sons were all sickly born. Wonder that would be so beguiled by the beautiful and fierce goddess. So he was on the side of Millennia also. But not much is quite understood if Radahn was anyway like against this kind of favoritism going on in like the background, which Radahn's painting, mind you, is actually demonstratedly shown in the Volcano Manor, as well as Rykard's, but for whatever reason, Ranni's is not, although that could be in respect for her change of appearance. Although it could also be part of their overall understanding of wanting to go against their siblings and rivals within the Golden Order. That is purely speculation, mind you. Don't take that as fact. Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on in the Volcano Manor. We even see a painting of an official. I mentioned this in a recent video, where basically I think it could be of, I do believe it could be of our new fella, the newer demigod that we find out about, the Impaler. But that's for another time, perhaps, when we get more information and even to the DLC itself. And a little less about Mesmer speculation pure. But overall, the conflict between the Volcano Manor and Leyndell has majority of the attention of Leyndell for its conflicts. Like, it seems to me because it took this huge important aspect from them that there's little background work that they can actually physically do to them and stop them. So now it's just upfront and personal, and quite frankly, one of these forces has the high ground, quite literally. And they have a little of everything to their disposal that the other really doesn't want anything to do with. Like, there is fire, magma, etc. in this place. And if the further in you go, there's also the Carian marionettes there, as well as the finger creepers. Basically anything Leyndell does not want anything to do with, you can find it there. Even like a worm face in the skies for whatever reason. Although I do think that could be just a mimic tier. I'm not too sure. But then there's also the serpents, serpent men. It's not too understood what they truly represent, but for this time being, they represent Volcano Manor, and they represent what is now Rykard, after he gave himself to the Great Serpent. But without their rulers and champions, Leyndell is no longer really actively seeking great battles. All they have left is essentially scraps, as they have Morgott at the head, and his focus is trying to keep a stability of the Golden Order, as well as the sanctuary of the protection of the Erdtree itself. In which case, everyone at their weakest from great battles, what's left to cause the greatest threat would be the Tarnished and his own father, Godfrey. In which case, Morgott's attention would be to prepare for this sort of thing, as well as crush any would-be challengers that would dare go after the weakest of the demigods. After Godwyn, or not Godwyn, Godrick. You know, there's a lot of people with similar names in this game. But, it makes perfect sense that Margit the Fell Omen would be in defense of Godrick, their weakest demigod. And even, if it was right here that he stopped Radahn, when it comes to omens, their illusions tend to guard what's some kind of like sacred, important locations. We see another one around this general vicinity that guards the front area region towards Leyndell. Although I'm pretty sure it's more so to draw attention from this angle of it, because the rest of the way there is not too clear if you look at the more adjacent map, because there is no like straight up pathway there. It's just like you're making your path there almost. So it's almost more of like a solving it to a solution from the future here. So the reason why for that encampment is purely because of Godrick. More specifically, he took the Coward's Path. That's why it's called the Coward's Path. It's not stated, but it is very heavily implied that he must have taken this path. For whatever reason, this is called the Coward's Path for starters. Secondly, there's all these random golem wreckages here, as well as cart wreckages here. Third, we have Lansseax for whatever reason on guard of this path. We have all these omens here for otherwise no reason. But another thing that really should drive home the point of why this is called the Coward's Path. Godrick only had half the medallion to use the lift. He could only get here on foot. He had to climb ladders, take lifts, and he had to take the Coward's Path. He had no alternative reason of a means to like get to Altus Plateau in general. He had to either take the Coward's Path, or he probably had at some point used that traveling trapped chest. Those would have been his only ways into Altus Plateau, as well as probably out of it. In fact, this was probably part of his loot. All these carts here were part of the moving of material, of weaponry, and what became artillery and such also. And also, maybe a few also became stolen goods. Or at the very least, that's my best understanding as to what was really going on with this path. In which case, Godrick being Godrick, unable to get a real dragon, he also failed to get a real dragon because Lanciax was not having it with him nor his men down this path. So yeah, the more you know. But come to think of that, to the topic of like the looting and that would also explain some of this right here, with like the carts with stuff still in it. If Godrick, say, took off with majority of the working oversized force, say trolls and golems and whatnot with him, then basically who's pulling it? Who's pulling all this over here? The people of Leyndell? They ain't doing that. They're nobles. In which case, a lot of it really wasn't going too far, and the Mad Pumpkinheads were not a reliable concept to that because they were more of a detriment. They were more of a weapon than they were a utility. In which case, all they could really do is keep a look after it or whatever else. And so they basically adopted this scene as part of their protective watch territory of encampments, and kind of like sieged it up to better guard off like basically the Coward's Path. And more than likely, quite a lot of this really just ended just before the Tarnished came back, in theory. Which, that's what makes the most sense to me. Because otherwise they had years to do whatever to get it back on the move on. Like, there is golems over that way, but they're in service to the protection of that over there, to the Shaded Castle. They can't just be distributed for the sake of these people. They have their own responsibilities. Or at least that's my overall take on that. I mean, I don't think they can exactly manipulate a crab. My gosh, what if there was, like, lobster riders or something? A weapon to surpass Metal Gear. But that may come to another consequence as to where exactly Godefroy, Godrick's accomplice, would be imprisoned. Of course, it wouldn't be anywhere near the route Rick himself was using to escape. Instead, it would be by the Grand Lift Adeptus. All because he didn't have the other half of the medallion. There was nothing close to a convenient travel for him. It'd be at nothing but risks and peril. And that was assuming if he even found out where he would have to go get him. Like, strategically, this is actually a pretty good spot. And it's actually low effort maintenance to keep him, and nothing of risk of anyone else nearby. Otherwise, if Godrick himself wanted to get the other half of the medallion, he would have to come all the way here into Caelid, get into this upper section past Celia, which was definitely guarded by Radahn. He would have to basically make his way up into Fort Faroth and the Dragon Barrow. Keep in mind, there is no proper path that bridges between these two areas. For the most part, it would be more likely he would come into contact with Radahn for it. But at the same time, I want to say it's likely that even Radahn and his men probably use the Spirit Spring stuff with their horses. There isn't exactly any talk about this exactly as a phenomenon for entities, but it is quite likely. Otherwise, they are users of sorcery. And there is actually a rise in this general vicinity. I don't have it on this character, but it's like right... I think it's like right here or so. Like I said, I don't have it on this character. But, that would more than likely require him to confront Radahn, which he definitely does not want to do. In which case, it will forever become a meme to the Erdtree's people and representatives of the Golden Order to consider Godrick a coward. So, overall, that would mean that, however, seals like this have existed in the later period of the Shattering. And it was definitely in the use of people of the Erdtree. And that does gives us a good idea of like putting a timeline to these, which is also a topic I'm very much interested in. But that is really its own very different video. Should be sort of mentioned briefly that on this way of like the Coward's Path though, there is another kind of a bit of like a credible sort of like evidence that it's likely the route that Godrick himself took. And that is to the topic that he may have had some of like his own dragon knights take this path with them. In which case, one of them may have, as a consequence of their habits in Dragon Communion, fully changed into a dragon worm. The one specifically we fight here, Makar. Whether or not he was an issue or not for Godrick is not fully understood. And there isn't really a very good way to be sure of this. But he could have been used as a way to kind of seclude off the Erdtree's people to like not exactly follow after Godrick any further after he sort of narrowly escapes. But let's actually take a quick look at the map here to better understand what was likely Godrick's path. Now, from the Erdtree capital, He is likely going through one of these doors. It's not understood if there was once a way here or not. But there is like a door there that doesn't quite go to anything right now. And seems to be mostly flooded out at this point. But more than likely took this way. Rushed all the way out and about. And also probably either some sketchy looking path out the back where there is also a notable amount of siege detail readied and wait for combat, which could be part of the force chasing him out. If he knows his way, he would know he is not getting too much of anywhere this way besides some sketchy footing paths to this church and onward down here. But I almost want to say it's likely him and his men took this bridge and maybe that got destroyed in the process to prevent being followed, or maybe to prevent any further of his men intervening over this way. Maybe Lanciax overlooking it shattered it herself, which is probably why it's so massively destroyed. In which case, he would be on this end, be able to work his way out here, take the coward's path, which is watched over by Lanciax, mind you. Take this watery whatever, full of ruins and what else. If you take a route like this, it's actually very little in your way. But essentially he would find his way up to this portion. Otherwise, that's a little curious as to why or how he would make it here to cross that to the artist check. Although there is a curious Leyndell soldier like around here that does drop a dragon communion book, prayer book, when we like beat him. But like I said, assuming he gets this way, there is down the road a few nobles. They're a bit of a whatever. And there is the bridge that is now crumbled that gets mentioned to us. And there is a troll and a cart there also. Otherwise, these are Karian, maybe Cuckoo. Although I know that weapon over there is half an interest. But it's clear that these Karian folk are not part of their friends, considering the bodies here. What suggests that this was once a period where he was taking essentially a cart over that way, lost his buddy helping him pull it, and this was just no longer a functioning bridge. And like I said, overall, this is more so in closing tying of this overall subject. There isn't anything suggesting the Shattering War involved in any way, shape, or form the Liurnians. In fact, they had their own thing going on between the Ray of Lucaria, the Carians, and the Cuckoo. Then a little of everything, just because Radahn left and everyone else was kind of like falling apart there. Just a little of this happened and a little of that happened. The Albinorics kind of happened here as their own people of population. Vare and them set up the Rose Church and tried recruiting them here. Or at least that's my understanding of that. Certain areas got more flooded and destroyed. Otherwise, it's nothing that quite happened regarding to the Shattering. Something that I do think is a thing is that this Purified Ruins, I do believe this is in control of Godrick, or his men. We see there's a talisman in there, the 2 fingers, which boosts faith, by the way, by like 5. But besides that, we see a Shaburi grape there, as well as a Shaburi grape back here. Now, overall, vast majority, actually all of the Shaburi grapes we can find in the game are found in Liurnia, which could be in relations to some of the conflict between I'm people of faith and I'm people of mind that have kind of like spread in this eastern side of it, where we also seem to have the most churches. Like we have a church here, we have a church here, we have a church just right down here. This isn't quite a real church, it's more of something Vare uses. And then if you look along the left side, we have primarily rises and things more sacred to the Liurnians and Albinorics both. So that should give you more of a logical breakdown of this and where it stands with everything. But I do believe that Purified Ruins was there to specifically try to purify one of the maddened inhabitants. But nothing else happened in the mountaintop of the giants. There's no sign of true factions this way. I mean, there is basically just forbidden maddened folk, as well as what could be a Castellan of the Erdtree's officials, maybe maddened with ideas with the flame of the fire giants. And there's no sign that Faramazula had anything to do with anything in the war. But yeah, now you have more of like the realistic rundown to what all really entailed with the War of the Shattering. Now, where is it all in timeline with each other? Honestly, anyone's guess is probably better than no guess. But I do believe Godrick led the majority of it. I believe the demigod children each got a great rune, and then Godrick got the scraps left behind. That was the skeleton when he entered in. Then he escaped. And then he kept some kind of memento chest that allows him to go straight back in there should he really want to. And I am, of course, talking about that goofy tower area, or that takes you to Millennia's Tower. It's like right here. It has like a singular golem to it. And that might be why there's a golem there, honestly. What I don't know if the way he got in there and got to all those treasures, if it was backdooring in that way. I think that could be the case. I'm still not 100% sure if it was truly that the challenge with Radahn happened first, or if the challenge with Malenia happened first. But Kenneth suggests it was Radahn first. But whichever the case, he also suggests that he basically licked Malenia's boots, which could be part of the ego of that girl. I am Malenia, Blade of Mikola, and I have never known defeat. So yeah, I know I definitely probably gave you guys a good list of ideas as to what was likely the cause and effect of quite a few things. I hope you all enjoyed that. Honestly, I think it's pretty fun trying to come up with like these sorts of theories and looking around to piece together why this is this way, why this is that way. And just as curious as why there's these arenas that basically face the Erdtree, I do think maybe at one point, like just before the Shattering, they were in use. And maybe even Radahn was quite a sport about it. That very much could be a thing. But there's not much else we can go off of with topics like that without DLC saying anything about it. Yeah, thanks again for watching. You have yourselves a great day. Hope you all learned a few fun things. And you have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.